Thank you for joining me in the Business 7 studio, where we have a packed program for you this week, touching on very controversial issues. We're looking at state-owned enterprises, public enterprises, the lack of these SOEs to submit annual financial reports, and then also the Auditor General's role in all of this, the fact that he points out red flags and absolutely nothing gets done about it. In the studio to discuss these matters are Advocate John Walters. He is the Ombudsman, as well as the Executive Director of the Institute of Public Policy Research, Graham Hopwood. And then to close off, we're talking to the Managing Director of Liberty Life Namibia, Monique Cloete, and she's going to give us an idea of where the industry is now in terms of the impact of COVID-19. It's my honor to welcome the Ombudsman of Namibia, Advocate John Walters, in the studio. Good day, Advocate Walters, and welcome.
Good day too, and good day to the viewers, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you.
Advocate Walters, you've recently released a report that shows that since 2018, your office has been trying to get financial information regarding August 26, which of course is a public enterprise. But during the course of your investigation, you've actually extended this to include all state-owned enterprises or public enterprises. How difficult was it to get information that you were looking for?
Extremely difficult. If a reader of the report will conclude that that is a clear ignorance or a matter of ignorance or to ignore the Ombudsman, which is a constitutional office. When you write to a responsible minister and he or she does not even acknowledge receipt of your letter or respond to your letter, then you know you are lost.
Yeah, it's absolutely. When I read through the report, and of course it is the main story today on Business 7, so please read it. We give the entire story, setting out from one letter to the next, but it is absolutely baffling. Yes, if it was an individual, one might even have said it was rude.
I have always respect, and I will maintain my respect for those in head of ministries. But if they, and as the past 16 years as Ombudsman, I'd learned that the lowest ranking and up to the highest ranking of official in any ministry, just ignore the Ombudsman. I have to write more than one letter. I have to threat, and I'm still busy on this very moment to threat ministers to provide me with the required information, because I have to report to complainants.
Yes.
And in the eyes of the complainant, the Ombudsman is doing nothing. Can you blame them?
And that, of course, then becomes the perception, is that the ombudsman is either doing nothing or otherwise he's a toothless bulldog.
Or he's captured by the government.
Exactly, exactly. Just in a nutshell, for the layman, the office of the ombudsman, it is provided for in the Constitution. What exactly is its role?
Very briefly, the ombudsman is a constitutional office. His or her independence is guaranteed by the Constitution, and all organs of state and persons shall provide the ombudsman with the necessary assistance. And the mandate, a very broad mandate, of receiving and investigating complaints of what we named maladministration, violation of human rights, protection of the environment, and what was left from its original mandate of fighting corruption, and that is the investigation of misappropriation of public monies and misuse of public property by officials. So you can see it's a very, very broad mandate. But the Ombudsman legislation dated from July 1990. It is outdated.
Okay.
And it did not develop and move with the change of times in Namibia too. So the Ombudsman powers is what the members of Parliament decided in 1990.
Okay.
Just to tell you what the late Moses Kajuhanga said, he had the last word on the debate or the discussion of the Ombudsman Act 7 of 1990. And he said to the Honourable Speaker, the teeth I wanted to give to the Ombudsman lie lost in the sands of the desert. Prophetic, but true words.
Indeed, indeed. So you would very much like to see that the scope of your powers be broadened.
The scope, and as well as the mandate of the Ombudsman. And the new, or the bill, cover all these deficiencies or shortcomings in the Act. I do not have the power to visit police stations and correctional services out of or unannounced.
Yes.
I cannot investigate matters out of own motion. I assume that power, and I've done so many reports out of own motion. So I read into my legislation, which does not appear there. But that is all to make sense of the Act and to help the citizens of Namibia.
Of course, because if you have to announce yourself first, that defeats the whole purpose.
The purpose,
exactly. Just to take the viewers a little bit back, those of you that haven't had chance to read the story yet, quickly tell us what the nature of the complaint was that you started investigating in 2018 and why you expanded it to include all SOEs.
It was a simple complaint filed with my office that specifically the public enterprise, August 2016, did not submit, and that was submit annual financial statement to the National Assembly to be accountable. But the Public Enterprises Act, the old one and the new one, requires from the board of the enterprise to submit to the portfolio minister annually a report inclusive of audited financial reports and to report on the activities. You can understand that provision is mandatory.
Yes, of course.
But when I realized that it may be assumed or presumed that I want to make single out August 20. I realized, because I'm a citizen of this country, I read newspapers and realized that there are many other public enterprises which are in the same boat.
Yes.
So I've extended my investigation, empowered by the Ombudsman Act, and I requested the National Assembly to provide me with the information of a list of enterprises which complied with their obligations, and when for the past 10 years, which of them submitted. And as the list, from the list it appears that a number of them, not a single, and specifically August 26, not from its inception or establishment in 1998.
No annual statement.
No annual statement. Many of them, and every year we read in the newspaper or heard that Parliament bailed out some of these defaulting, without no knowledge of what happened with public money.
Of course, there's no accountability whatsoever.
No accountability. And all what I've tried with this simple report to draw the attention, as I said, of the National Assembly, I do not have powers to investigate National Assembly. I report to National Assembly. But in a certain sense, and I say it with the biggest respect to the legislators, but they also failed their duty. Nobody questioned.
No, they do. And I may say it because I'm a journalist, but yes, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that they do fail that responsibility. And as a matter of fact, on page 3 of Business 7 today, we have another report that comes from the IPPR, the Institute for Public Policy Research, where they've actually looked at parliamentarians and the fact that they just let these reports, financial reports or audit reports that are tabled, even though they do have access to that information, they still don't ask the right questions. There's still no action taken, even when these reports show that those entities are in contravention of the State Finance Act. Advocate Walters, at the end of your report, you urged the Minister of Public Enterprises, Leon Schuster, to launch an investigation into SOEs not submitting annual financial statements. And then you tabled your report in Parliament. What do you expect from Parliament to do on the one hand, and what do you think will happen?
I gave the Minister the opportunity to respond to my report before I submitted it to the National Assembly. He did not make use of the opportunity, so I was compelled by legislation to submit it to the National Assembly because he failed to implement my recommendation, and he did not provide me reasons for his failure. In my report, I also said, but the legislation, my legislation, does not make provision of what National Assembly must do.
Exactly.
But I received the minutes of the National Assembly, of the proceedings of the National Assembly of 30th of September. It appears from that minutes that the Honourable Speaker laid on the table of the National Assembly my report, and that it is referred to the Parliamentary Standing Committee of Public Accounts. Why I submitted to the National Assembly is because the National Assembly represent the final enforcement power of the Ombudsman. The Act and the Constitution do not provide the Ombudsman with enforcement powers. That is only the court who have that power, in which I have to approach. So all I'm sitting waiting now. If the specific standing committee needs me to explain my report, which I don't think it needs explanation,
no,
for any other reason, I'm waiting for it. But it must happen soon, because my term of office ends at the end of July. Then I will retire from the job.
Advocate Walters, you're not the only one eagerly waiting to see what is going to happen now. The media certainly is too, and so I think is every citizen in this country. We wish you the best of luck with specifically this report. Thank you very much for the wonderful work your office is doing, and we also wish you a wonderful rest of your remainder of your term.
Yes, it is always, I always said, just to conclude, I didn't have many jobs when after I returned from university, but this was the most satisfying job I ever have. To see the smile of a complainant, that you change his or her circumstances, and you see the anger of a person who put on the ombudsman duties which I do not have, who became so unreasonable that he wanted to attack the officials working around. But that is all in a day's work, isn't it?
It takes indeed a tough, but also a very sincere man. Thank you very much for your time, Advocate.
Thank you all for the opportunity to engage with the media and the public.
Thank you. To me is Graham Hopwood. He's the Executive Director of the Institute of Public Policy Research, or the IPPR as we know it. Welcome, Graham, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, good to be here.
Graham, the IPPR this year, as previously, but very important this year, has once again focused on state-owned enterprises or public enterprises, as it's also known, and the whole issue around annual financial statements or reports that they need to hand in, and then recently also how effective Auditor General reports are in this regard. In a nutshell, what has the IPPR found in terms of Auditor General reports?
Well, in general, I mean, there's a lack of proactivity from the Auditor General's side, which is partly to do with the legal situation of the office, that they are not really having enforcing powers. So they are reporting on a whole load of issues, at public enterprises, but also within ministries and at local councils and regional councils. A whole range of red flags are being raised, and the media do point this out on a regular basis. But the problem is, and this has been going on for more than 20 years, no action, nothing happens. And the most we can hope for is the Public Accounts Committee at Parliament, at the National Assembly in particular, take an issue up, have a public hearing, and embarrass a director or an executive director. But even then, nothing really happens afterwards. A little bit of media embarrassment, but no real action. And so we're in this dysfunctional situation where the Auditor General, from an auditing point of view, is doing a good job in terms of finding out what's going on and pointing out irregularities, and doing it increasingly in a faster time scale. Yes. So that's good. But what's the point then if nobody ever takes it up? So, there are a whole load of issues here to do with the relationship between the Auditor General and the ministries or the different agencies involved, but also the Anti-Corruption Commission, the Office of the Ombudsman and others, where if we had a proper systematic relationship between the offices, then maybe things would be quickly red flagged and quickly followed up. But that seems to be totally missing at the moment.
It's precisely what you've said. I mean, I've been covering this for years too, and you really get to the point, even when it does go to the public committee or the standing committee, that you feel it's rather useless even reporting on it, because there are never any consequences. Why do you think? What is lacking? I mean, it's spelled out in audit reports that this and this is in contravention of the State Finance Act, and yet nothing happens, or if it does, we're certainly not informed. What is the crux of the problem?
Part of it is the legal powers of the Auditor General, and actually, you know, if you've been covering this, you probably know that we've had something called the Audit Bill in draft form since 2006 at least. I've never seen anything like a finished version of it. It's somehow lost, like many planned pieces of legislation, lost in the system. And it's weird in Namibia that things don't remain lost just for months or years, but decades.
Gone.
And that could actually help a lot. If we can see it and comment on it, then maybe we could strengthen the role of the Auditor General in some way without crossing the line. Because the Auditor General will tell you, you know, I can report on these things, but I can't be like the judge who convicts. He has to report to somebody who takes action. So there has to be a more proactive relationship between, particularly we've said, the Anti-Corruption Commission and the Auditor General, where these things are very quickly communicated. And although we've suggested that for years, that doesn't seem to have happened on the ground. So clearly there's dysfunction between the two institutions. But in the worst cases of corruption, that could help. I mean, that could certainly make a difference. The ACC should launch an investigation on the basis of what the Auditor General says and what information they can pass across. And that would be one way of doing it. Some of these things are maybe not clear-cut corruption, but more irregularities, maladministration. And therefore, you know, the Auditor General should also be in touch with the line ministries, with the responsible body within government. So, you know, we hear, for example, the Auditor General points out something definitely wrong in this local authorities accounting, tells the Ministry of Urban and Regional Development about it, which is the line ministry. But then the ministry will say, oh, well, we'll have to look at it, you know, but there's never any feedback, nothing happens. So that's the problem, I think, that there's a lack of accountability. But getting the ACC Auditor General relationship right would at least be a strong first step. But, you know, this is something that, and the Auditor General needs to recognize that he might be doing good work, but what is the point if action is not taken?
Exactly.
And these things repeat themselves again and again in successive reports. We all need to look at them more closely, but if there is no system for action. So I'm also hopeful that maybe with the new National Assembly, new Public Accounts Committee of different people sitting on it, because really we didn't really hear much about the Public Accounts Committee in the last 5 years.
We haven't.
They've had very few public sessions
compared to previously, they've been very quiet, yes.
So with a new chairperson, maybe they will be more active with more opposition members, we hope, once the committee conflicts about composition are sorted out, that they could at least insist on some kind of action and resolutions to be committed to by. They can call the Auditor General, for example, to the hearings, as well as the officials and even the ACC, and say, look, you know, what's happening here? So I'm just hoping that we can, with the change in the nature of Parliament, move to a more sort of a more sort of effective system, and that something will start to happen, because we're obviously allowing corruption to take place, but also wasting a huge amount of money as well, losing money because of bad governance. And these are things that, you know, if the president is, you know, serious about improving the institutions and strengthening the systems, this is obvious an area where we need to act quickly and forthrightly and get things moving.
Which brings me to Parliament, or the National Assembly, and it's also pointed out in your report. There seems to be two factors that one can take into consideration, because there's very little debate on these reports when it gets tabled in Parliament. One of them, interestingly enough, is that the IPPR points out that it's unlikely that members of Parliament which belongs to the ruling party will want to be seen as criticizing ministries, etc., when these reports are tabled.
Well, yeah, I mean, historically, I mean, obviously, backbenchers tend to toe the party line, and therefore, in other parliaments around the world, you find they might be called mavericks or whatever, but you have MPs who are not part of the executive, even if they're in the ruling party, who will raise critical issues, and there's no reason why they can't do that, because it's actually in keeping with what the President has said about transparency and accountability equaling trust. So, there should be more activity amongst swapper backbenchers, but also on the opposition side as well. So it's a question of having informed, engaged, active MPs who can raise these issues. So, if everybody's doing their job, the media, the MPs, the Auditor General, the different constitutional bodies, we can definitely start tackling these issues. But at the moment, people are hanging back for various reasons and not fulfilling their duties as they should do.
Also, another burning question that one has to ask is, our parliamentarians, do they have the necessary skills to ask the right questions stemming from these reports?
I'm not sure that they do, and that's where the training and capacity building needs to come in, to understand the Auditor General's reports and to know what their responsibilities are in terms of these things. So when they say tabled in Parliament, it often just means these things are sort of dumped on a table somewhere, and nobody ever looks at them. And unless an MP brings a motion to debate any of these reports, they don't get discussed. They might get discussed behind closed doors by the Public Accounts Committee, but we don't know. The public is not informed, and that's another weakness in the National Assembly. We don't hear what the committees do unless they actually organise a public event or meeting. We don't know what these committees do, and they have been, I think, mostly inactive for the last 5 years, because very few pieces of legislation have been referred to committees for discussion. So, again, we hope with the change in Parliament and perhaps more accountability in the new National Assembly that these things will come up more.
Graham, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it, and like the IPPR, we're looking forward to see some change. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the other issue actually, just as you raised at the beginning, is the public enterprises and their lack of reporting again. So we will next year be doing a new public enterprise index, which will look at which ones are releasing information. So we've actually been contacted by quite a few public enterprises saying, we want to rise up the rankings, what do we do? So that's an encouraging sign.
Wonderful.
And if they can release these financial reports and annual reports in a more timely way, that's one way of showing that they are better governed.
Yes,
so, yeah.
We might get lucky and even see something from Air Namibia.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Graham.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
In the studio with us, Monique Cloete. She's the Managing Director of Liberty Life Namibia. Welcome, Monique, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Jo Marie. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be sharing with you and your viewers.
Thank you. We're looking at Liberty Life as an indication of what's happening in the industry at this stage, as you are a significant player in the local market. Monique, the whole COVID situation, can you give us, in a nutshell, what the impact has been on the industry?
So, Jo Marie, it's really, Namibia has been in a bit of a tough situation prior to COVID. And I think the lockdown has really added to our economic woes. We've really seen an impact on particularly claims around retrenchment, more so than, I mean, we've been concerned about mortality, yes. With the advent of COVID, but what we found is that retrenchments actually played a bigger role. As a result of the lockdown, we're seeing more economic strife. People having lost jobs, or having reduced their income. Long-term insurance generally doesn't seem to be high on the list of priorities. So that tends to be the first thing that people sort of look at, is to say, should I not cancel my insurance cover because I'd rather have food on the table. And that's been quite tough, I believe, for the whole industry. Obviously, COVID will impact all your insurers differently based on what their mix of customers are and what types of cover they're offering. So that it'll be different for each insurance company. But that's in general, we've seen the economic impact weigh a lot heavier on insurers than the mortality aspect of
That's
COVID.
very interesting because, as you've pointed out, your first impulse was that you're going to be hit on the mortality side of it. Monique, when we look at Liberty specifically, to which extent have you met clients halfway in terms of relief?
So Jo, when we developed our products initially, we had put in a period of time that customers would get relief. So that has continued during COVID as well. What we've also allowed is for customers to reduce cover. And we believe that that's assisted during this period of time, but it is a rather tough environment for us as an insurer, but also for the general population. Yes. I believe it was one of your articles that spoke about a number of families, about 70% of families, having to readjust their lifestyles as a result of the impact of COVID. And I really do think I don't think it's something that we're going to see the end of very, very soon. I believe it's going to be with us for a little bit of time, possibly into 2021, well into 2021. Yes, there are glimmers of hope with the vaccine that's been sort of touted, but I believe we're still going to see the impact for a bit of time, looking at potentially the cost of that vaccine. I imagine may take some people out of the market for it. So I definitely think we're going to see the real impacts coming through still in 2021.
When one looks at the whole issue, you mentioned it just now, of disposable income being under tremendous pressure at the moment, and as you've said, one of the first things that you think you can sort of put on the back burner for now is insurance. How important is it that people keep on saving? Because as it is, we have a massive problem in the country when it comes to savings.
Yes.
How do you advise the public on the importance of saving for a rainy day?
So as Liberty, our purpose as an organization is to impact people's lives, to make their financial freedom possible. And in line with that purpose, we've launched a Mind My Money program that we provide to employers free of charge for their employees. And we've also digitized that so that it is now available on our Facebook page, and people can access this program sort of from anywhere at this stage. And really what it is intended to do is to assist in helping people manage their day-to-day finances, understanding your relationship with your service providers, your bank. What is it that your bank can do for you? Generally, we believe, we need a bank account, but often what I find is what we do is what our parents did.
Of course.
So if my parents banked with a certain institution, so do I,
very
without checking anything else.
And comparing, yeah.
Yes, without checking what may work better for me. So I think that's important, that we do look at things like our relationships with our banks, our insurers, debt that we have, and what is I do believe there is such a thing as good debt and
Yes,
bad
of course
debt.
there is.
So, you know, what is my situation? How do I change this? What do I need to realign? I think it's a very important time for people to actually say, you know what, these things they are luxuries, and for us to admit it to ourselves. It is tough.
Yes.
It's very tough to do. But for us to admit that I could be saving and I could be doing better if I controlled X, Y, and Z. I think that's the realization we've got to get to. And I know a lot of people are there because they've been forced there as a result of reductions in salaries. Other organizations haven't yet gone that route. And people sort of carry on as per normal, as if nothing has changed. But I think our lives are very definitely going to, if they haven't already, going to change very soon. So I think management, your management of money becomes so much more important. And I could talk to you about this all day. It's something that's very close to my heart, is trying to assist people to manage their money better.
Just give us a quick refresher again. Where can they find this product and what is it called?
So it's called Mind My Money, because we mind our business and we mind everything else. So let's mind our money as well. And it's available on our Facebook page. You can actually link to the webinars that we host, and it covers 6 different modules over sort of a one a month type of period. And employers can do this digitally or face-to-face for their employees as well. I must admit, as I say, it's quite close to my heart, so I've done some research into it, and it does add value for employers as well. Because if you've got people who are financially comfortable, you generally don't have them worrying while they're at work about their financial circumstances. Yes. So there are positive impacts for the employer as well. And we really believe that this is a route that every Namibian needs to take in order to survive a period like this and to continue to save. The worst thing you have is a situation where you've cancelled your insurance because of financial circumstances and you end up with an event, be it a disability, an illness event, a death event, and you end up with no income from that insurance policy. So that's really sad for me if people end up in that type of situation.
Monique, thank you very much. It was nice having you in the studio. That is Monique Cloete. She's the Managing Director of Liberty Life Namibia.
Thank you very much, Jo. I appreciate it.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly found it very insightful and enjoyable. It's always nice to hear people speak their minds. Until next time, goodbye.